In order to be as effective as you were day to day at work, you had to have the separation at 5 or 5:30, whatever time you went home, to recharge, to give your family what they deserve, to then plug back in the next day and start fresh. You've seen it. I've seen it. Think about the guys that go work in investment banking and they're doing 90 hours a week. They're not allowed to leave the office before 8 or 9 at night. Those guys burn out. Well, why do they burn out? Because they have no balance. And the older I get, the more I realize life is more and more and more about effective balance, not just having balance, but being effective in all the areas that you're balancing.
Welcome to the Exceptional Companies Podcast, a podcast for purpose-led entrepreneurs looking to master the art of buying, selling, or optimizing small businesses. Your host, Chris Seegers, founder of Exceptional Companies and author of Selling Main Street, has over a decade of experience starting, buying, and leading successful businesses. He's here to guide you through the complex world of business transactions and growth. Each week, we dive deep with actionable insights, expert interviews, and real-world strategies to activate and equip you to live exceptionally and build exceptional businesses. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Here's your host, Chris Seegers.
Welcome to the Exceptional Business Podcast, hosted by yours truly, Chris Seegers, where we explore how to buy, sell, and optimize your small business. I have Greg Wiggins back on the show. We were riffing on a few things, and this is going to be a shorter one, but just something we wanted to chat about. So, Greg, you were talking about the lack of boundaries or delineation of boundaries with your family as opposed to work. So I wanted to chat a little bit about that and what you've seen. I would say that most influencers in social media now are absolutely lying and telling the wrong story to young entrepreneurs. And that story is grit, grind, work 60 to 80 hours a week, focus on the business, grow it up, make a ton of money, buy the Ferrari, do the things. We have taken a totally countercultural approach. And we have 9 different businesses, right? Like we've had some success. We'll have a lot more success down the road. So we're not somebody that doesn't know anything about this. We've got a lot of employees and stress and things happening. The approach we've taken recently, I'd say 5 years ago, was when we are home, we are home. So I generally work, 7 to 5 p.m. And when I'm home, I'm home. And my phone goes upside down or in the closet or in the room or wherever, right? Wherever I'm changing. And I am focused on my kids. From 5 to 7:30, it's family time. We don't do any screens in our family. And then from 7:30, usually at 8:30 or 9, it's time with my wife, dedicated time. It may just be relaxing time catching up. After that, if there's things I've got to attend to for the business, I spend some time there. But tell me a little bit about why this is so fascinating to you, because I've seen the same thing where these young entrepreneurs, men and women that I'm coaching, they're getting just terrible counsel. They're ruining their lives. And then I'm asking them, why are you even doing this? Why are you building this business? And it's like, well, I want to take care of my family and do this thing. And it's like, you just ruined your relationship with your wife. Your kids never see you. They're going to dislike you, hate you, or just be ambivalent to you because you never spend time with them. And yet you're saying you're building this for them. So I think that's incongruent. They don't have integrity in that. And we've really been pushing back. Even when people text me at night, usually I say, hey, unless it's, a friend that's an emergency or something, it's usually I either don't respond or I respond, at 9 and, hey, is this important or can we catch up tomorrow? But man, chat a little bit about your experience. And then I'd love to talk about some tools and tricks for how we could do this better as men and women.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I want to start with meeting you in Midland. I generally show up 15 minutes early before the workday. Chris is there before I am. And then I'm thinking, well, I'm going to work until, 6 or 7, be a good soldier, top performer. Chris takes off at 5. And I noticed every day when you're at work to work. It wasn't, hey, let's go over by the water cooler, the break room. Let's talk about sports, whatever it is, conspiracy theories for 45 minutes. And then maybe we'll get back to work in another 30.
I do love some conspiracy theories, though. That's whiskey night and conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Well,
proper place, proper format.
Yeah. I remember going home and telling my wife, how's work? It's good. I said, man, there's this guy there. I don't know about him. I think he may be One of the biggest
Weirdo.
jerks I've ever met. It took me time to understand. Then I got to see you outside of work, and I got to spend time with you as a man, as a brother, and you were as dialed in as you were at work. You were as dialed in, if not more, to me outside of work as a person. And what I started to understand was, oh, Chris respects himself enough and he respects the business enough and his coworkers enough that when he shows up, he is locked in and ready to work. It's not, let's dick around, let's mess around, let's waste some time. We're going to be as efficient as we can. We're going to provide value while we're at work. But then when it's time to go home, we're going to leave work at work. And there would be times where I would think that there was something important. We'd have a client that we were working in real property acquisition, and we'd have a deal come across that I thought, oh, we've got to get X, Y, and Z done. And I'd text you or call you, and you wouldn't pick up. And finally, one day at work, I was like, Chris, I got to understand this because my compensation was heavily incentive-based. And so I thought the harder I work, the more money we're going to make, we're going to be good. What I didn't understand was in order to be as effective as you were day to day at work, you had to have the separation at 5 or 5:30, whatever time you went home, to recharge, to give your family what they deserve, to then plug back in the next day and start fresh. You've seen it. I've seen it. Think about the guys that go work in investment banking, and they're doing 90 hours a week. They're not allowed to leave the office before 8 or 9 at night. Those guys burn out. Well, why do they burn out? Because they have no balance. And the older I get, the more I realize life is more and more and more about effective balance, not just having balance, but being effective in all the areas that you're balancing. And in order to do that, I have a question for you. I want to know, like, one, how did you get there? And then two, is there a morning or an evening routine? I heard a story about a salesman would come in off the road. He'd literally take his hat off and hang it on a branch outside his house just to reset his mind of like, okay, I'm home. I'm not a salesman anymore. It's time to go be a husband and a father. What tools do you use, or how did you get into the mindset of understanding, like, to be effective and to give both my family and the business what they deserve? I have to make a distinction.
Yeah, so I want to tell a story first, and then we'll go to some tips and tools. Number one, I fail at this every day. So I'm speaking as somebody who's practicing this, but let me tell a story. So in West Texas, generally, not always, but in West Texas, the women would always pick up their children from daycare. And I was kind of like, this is kind of BS. So I started picking up, I dropped our kids off and I picked our kids up every day. And my wife worked, but she could have done it as well. But I just said, hey, I want to be an example of a man who shows up, tells his kids, I love you, have a great day, be leaders, drops them off, knows the people that are taking care of my kids, loves on those people, and then also picks them up almost every day. And I didn't know about this. My wife told me this. So this is 5 years later. She said, hey, I was talking with one of my friends in Midland, and they said, when the other husbands heard that you were dropping your kids off, all of a sudden their wives were putting pressure on them. Hey, why aren't you dropping our kids off sometimes? And so now in that daycare where we have, I would say it's like 80% the dads dropping their kids off and picking them up from daycare. And the whole premise is reasonable, acceptable boundaries, right? So I believe most people waste most of their time. I tell my team, I'm like, if we can't accomplish it in 40 hours a week, we're doing something wrong. There's no business anywhere in the world where you need to work 60 hours a week. You're focusing on the right things, or you're being dramatically inefficient with your time. Mm-hmm. So that was the thing. When I showed up to work, I still wear the same thing. I wear a white shirt or a blue shirt, and now it's jeans instead of slacks. I wear a uniform, right? So it's my uniform. I put it on. When I go to work, I'm going to battle. I'm showing up and I'm doing the things at work, and I'm focused on that, right? And if you can focus on that, if you've got 8 hours a day is a heck of a lot of time. If you're not checking sports scores, if you're not looking at Facebook, if you're not goofing around doing whatever, right? If you put in 2 hours of deep work every day, you could change the world, much less 8 hours. So I really coach people on that. Is like, hey, wherever you are, be there. And my wife and I, she hates it when I say this because she'll be on her phone more than I am. And I'll say, hey, your presence is the present. And she hates it when I say it because it's so corny and it just bugs her. But I'm like, hey, we're here. If you need to work, go work, right? If you've got to answer some emails or something's pressing, go in the other room, take 30 minutes, do that, come back. But when you're here with us, be with us. Okay, so tricks and tools. Number one is you've got to stand up. You've got to have courage. You've got to have courage to tell your boss, hey, I've done an incredible job today. I'm going to pick up my kids. Okay, let's back up. How do I plan my week? I used to do this Sunday night where I would actually take the entire week, and there's some great tools through Robin Sharma and other folks that have done this for a long time that I use. But basically take your entire week and block it out. So it's like, hey, I know I've got these meetings, right? That's not deep work. That's busy work to some degree, that there's important things that come out of it. But I've got these things that I need to do. So I take my list and I prioritize my top 5. And I say, hey, these are the 5 things that I've got to do this week. And then I say, okay, there's actually only one. Let's start with one. This is the only thing I got to do this week. And I time block that out. So my entire week on Monday is time blocked. Every day I'm either doing, hey, I know I need to respond to emails, or I've got a meeting here, or hey, this is a 2-hour time block or 4-hour time block where I am doing this deep work, and I will do this deep work. So if somebody knocks on my door, they know, hey, I'm busy. I'm not looking at my emails. I've got my phone on silent or turned over, and I'm doing those things. So planning your week out, I would just suggest even just do it a little bit. Don't be so regimented like I am. Just start a little bit. Hey, give yourself 2 hours a day where you're only doing the most important things that you need to do at your job. So I've got a spreadsheet and I'll say, hey, this task, I need to do this thing. I put how many hours I believe it'll take, right? Hey, this task will take 2.5 hours. Most of the time, I can do it in half the time because I'm doing deep work. I can't remember who wrote it in their book, but they basically say we totally overestimate how long it takes us because we're just like goofing off and doing non-deep work. So something that would take us an hour actually takes us 4 hours. So that's a hack to get a ton of your time back, is just block your whole week out and then be very deliberate, but just start with 2 hours a day of deep work. Hey, block it out. Whenever it is, I like doing it in the morning because I think you've got more energy. From 8, I start work at 7:30ish, 7ish. From 7:30 to 9:30, that's when I'm going to create content, or that's when I need to work on marketing for the business, or that's when I need to come up with a coaching plan for our team. And that is dedicated time that I honor. That's why I said you've got to have courage. You got to honor yourself. If you don't honor yourself and your time, if you don't believe your time's worthwhile, then who cares? Go ahead and waste it, right? That's why
why would anybody else?
Yeah, exactly. So then once you've built that out, you've got to do the same thing with the rest of your life. So don't just stop from, let's say, 8 to 5, but take from 5 to whenever you go to bed, 5 to 10, right? So why would you not honor your family the same way you honor your work? In fact, they should be on a pedestal way above your work. So I take that and I time block it. And we're very intentional from 5 to 7:30, no screens. We do movies on the weekends as a family, right? It's a family movie night. It's not just my kids watching TV. And then generally it's us, we eat dinner every day. During dinner, even that, it's intentional, right? It's, hey, tell me your high and your low of the day. And then with the kids, usually say, oh man, my high was I hit a home run at playing with the kids. My low was my teacher said my handwriting sucked or whatever, right? Okay, cool. Then like some things come out of that we can coach on as parents. And then same thing with your marriage. Like if you're not honoring your marriage, once again, I'm saying as somebody practicing, not as somebody who's achieved this.
Amen to that.
Yeah, but if you want to have a good marriage, it's pretty simple, man. Put time and energy into it. That's it. Be consistent in the time and energy. So my wife and I have dedicated time where it's like, hey, tell me how your day went. Sometimes she's like, I don't want to talk about my day. Awesome. Let's talk about what are you excited about? Let's talk about our dreams then. If you don't want to talk about what you're in, let's talk about your dreams. What's one thing we should be doing this year? And then at the point in time, my wife goes to bed early. So at 8:39, if she's going to bed and she's going to sleep, if I still have gas in the tank, I dedicate an hour and a half, 2 hours or whatever. So last night I took 2 hours. I knew I had to get through the final edit of my book. And I said, hey, for 2 hours, I'm doing nothing but editing the book. And my kids are down. My wife was actually at a board meeting, so she wasn't there. I'm just dedicating this time. Boom. So I think really that time blocking, and just start small, right? People get so like they try to do the whole recipe day one. But I want to stop there, man, and just hear some of the tricks and tips that you've thought of, or some of the things that haven't worked maybe that you've seen.
I think you set the point that you made. If you don't respect your time, why would anybody else? Setting boundaries and being okay with disappointing people is okay. And as an employee, if you find that C-level or ownership does not respect those boundaries and is continually taking time that you need from your family, I would say that you're probably misaligned. And I would say as an owner, if you find employees that are, this sounds backwards, but if you find somebody that is always on call, I would question how long they will be able to remain effective in your organization. Because it
Absolutely.
just, human nature is such that if you demand somebody to be on all the time and they don't have time to recharge, sorry, but it's not going to work. You're
Absolutely.
going to burn out. If you're working out 10 hours a day, you're going to burn out. If you're working 12 hours a day, like in this day and age, with all the technology that we have, you said it, if you can't get it done in 8 hours a day, if you have one thing that you set out to accomplish that day, back to clarity that we talked about earlier, if you're very clear about the drivers that help you get to whatever your goals are, if you can't do that in 8 hours, there is something seriously wrong with the structure and the systems that you've got in place.
Absolutely.
So just
and I'll tag on that too. Like, so we're recruiting for some team members for our oil business as it's growing. And so I've been talking with a lot of folks in the industry because I usually try to recruit just by people that I know, right? Hey, who are some great people on the technical side? If we needed to add another asset that we could add, okay, talk to this guy. Awesome. The interesting thing is there's been 3 or 4 people from the same company that have said, hey, we would love to work with you. And I said, oh, interesting. Like, you're already in a very successful business. Why? Because our C-levels have no boundaries. They're like, we're making great money and we'll probably have an amazing exit event. But we would actually forego that to know that we're not going to get email Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning before we go to church with the expectation that I respond to that within 30 minutes. And if I don't respond to that, I'm going to get deemed culturally as somebody who doesn't have the company's best interest. And I said, that's absolute BS. And that is a lack of processes and a lack of respect for the people in that business.
Yeah.
So this is what I told that individual. I said, look, that will never be the case here. Honestly, and we said this in our oil company, don't call me unless we kill somebody or hurt somebody. And that rarely ever happens, right? If we have a deal that's going sideways on a Friday afternoon, that's okay. We'll take care of it Monday. If it's something really serious, if it's an emergency, you let me know and we're going to solve that thing right then and there. But in life, 99.999% of all things that people say are emergencies are just something that they're like, I want you to deal with this now because you don't respect yourself and have boundaries. So I know you're going to call me back or text me back or email me back because you don't have that respect.
Amen.
So with our team,
leaders,
man, with our team, we tell them it's like, hey, love you guys. Go have a great weekend. Don't think about work at all. Like, we'll let us take care of that. If there's something that needs to be thought of
that's the
as a
burden of the
leadership
business
team,
owner, right?
yeah, we'll take care of it. On Monday, I want you refreshed. I want you to have spent time with your family. I want you to have not looked at one single email. And if there's something we need to take care of, I'll handle it. Or we'll put in a process where we don't have to handle it. So yeah,
Now,
man,
the other side of that coin is when, as a business owner, when your folks show up to work, you better have the clarity and systems in place to give them the resources that they need to execute and then hold them accountable during work hours to whatever the deliverables that you have set. You want to find great people, do that, and then treat them like people outside of work, meaning let them have a life outside of work. It's your job to worry about the business, not theirs. You will find employees that care about the business as much as you do. They're rare. So don't build your business expecting everybody to treat it like you do. Otherwise, you're going to get burned out, they're going to get burned out, and you're going to lose employees.
100%.
So
I just interviewed a gal that we added to our team and I said, hey, so we've got all of our culture, right? Like, very specific. So when I hire somebody before on the first interview, I'm like, here's our values that we live out. Like, this is how I will measure your performance. And I said, we hire self-governed adults. I am not a micromanager. You will be measured every week. Everyone will know the scorecard. You're going to have the same scorecard as people in your position. And we will measure that every week. If you're not a self-governed adult that can show up and do those things, you will not have a place in our business. So you'll either love it or hate it. If you're a person that loves accountability and is like, hey, I'm driven, I want to make it happen, I want to get better, we're the team for you, right? You are going to get absolutely better. We're going to do our best to lead you very well. And we're going to create the processes and KPIs around you to understand what is working, what isn't, and coach you on the areas that isn't. But if you don't show up to work and you're going to give me, I'm not even asking you to give me a full 8 hours, but just give me maybe 6 out of the 8 hours. I understand there's time you got to think, you got to walk around, do things, whatever. But I want you to be dedicated and self-governed. If I have to micromanage you, that means you don't have a fit on our team. Not because I don't love you. And that's obviously once we've gone through multiple coaching opportunities, et cetera.
Yeah. How
But
long
if
is that
we get-
fuse generally for you? Do you have a ballpark where you say, like, I've found in my experience, if somebody does not perform within X amount of time, they generally are not going to be a fit in our organization?
Oh, dude, I love that question. This is like another thing, part of our culture of the company. People are always like, well, that isn't fair. This isn't fair, blah, blah, blah. Fairness is not a thing. There is no such thing as fairness in life. Every human being is different. So for one person, it may be 6 months, right? Because I know they're struggling with something and there's some other circumstances and they're giving me everything they can. They're doing the things that they can do to be successful. For other people, it might be 1 month. It might be, this is the most talented person in the world and they have a terrible attitude and they will never do the things I'm asking of them. Like, so fairness to me is not a thing. I know we're into this whole fairness conversation in mainstream. I'm like, that is impossible. Every human being that I hire is so unique. If I coached them exactly the same, I would be doing every single one of them disservice, right? So that conversation, and Marcus and I struggle with this, and we pray over it, and we think about it, and we always err on more grace up to a point. But we have a very structured way on how we do that. But if it's just somebody who's not a self-governed adult, who doesn't care, who's not a good cultural fit, who isn't putting in the time and effort, even though they know they can, that person will not have a place on our team. But if it's somebody who's like, hey, I struggle, I just got a divorce and I'm really struggling just showing up every day. Okay, like, how can we love on you? How can we serve you in a way that you're going to be able to work out of that? And they still have to do the work, but we have people with all kinds of mental disabilities, emotional disabilities. And so there's just that coaching is situational leadership, right? It's based on the human being there in the situation there. We say it in our business. I'm like, don't ever tell me fair. Don't ever say that's not fair. That is not a word we use in this business because every situation is different. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Amen. And I just want to say how much I admire the thought that you put into the structure and the processes and the measurement and the frequency with which you provide feedback to coworkers and employees, because at any time there is absolute transparency about performance to date, where you stand with the organizations within the organization relative to expectation. I feel like if you give that to people and they have an understanding of like, oh, here's the expectation, here's where I could go in this organization if I do A, B, C, and D. If there's no ambiguity there, then it's up to the who. You've solved the how and it comes back to who. The person's a fit or they're not. So again, I'll say it better than anybody that I know. And it's a function of how clear you are on where you want to go in the systems and processes that you guys use to get there. So hopefully in another episode, I can hear you talk to somebody about those systems and processes that you guys use, the scorecards and the metrics and the measurements and all that, because as a business owner, that to me is the single greatest thing outside of how you treat people that makes or breaks the company is the strength of those systems. So
yeah,
for whenever that
absolutely.
comes out, please let me know.
Do you like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode by clicking the subscribe button now and check out our website, www.excoadvisors.com. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
I want to close on one thing because this is where we started. We started about boundaries, right? So how do you establish fair, healthy boundaries? Here's what I want to close on. And this is something that I've been really thinking on, coaching on, and even talking with my wife about. Your standards for your kids, your wife, your marriage, your employees, your peers, your tribe are directly correlated with how much you love and care about them. Low standards for your kids, if you're like, whatever, they'll be okay. We really shouldn't push them that hard in sports. It's really not that important, or academically. That standard is directly you saying, I don't love my kid enough to have a high enough standard because I know what he's capable of and push him to have an exceptional life. I love him only enough to allow him to live a mediocre life with the things I can control as a parent. The same thing with your marriage or with your team member. If someone comes onto my team and my standards are super low. So with the last business we bought an insurance company, and I said, hey, we're going to be number one. This is our goal. We're going to be number one in our market. That's our standard. The reason I want this is because if we continue to grow, you continue to grow. If we stop where we are, you stop. My standards for my employees or my marriage or my wife, if they're low, if it's just like, whatever, show up whenever you want to and be late and be sloppy and don't make the calls and don't do the ops and don't do the things. That directly correlates to me saying, hey, Greg, you're a team member. I don't care about you. I don't care enough about you to actually build out the processes and the KPIs and to push you. And when you violate them, for me to have a conversation and say, hey, remember when we talked about this was a standard? Well, you're here. So, hey, let's get you back up to the standard. Not because I even need the revenue for my business, but because if I allow you to practice this, you will practice this in your career for a long period of time. And my standards dictate my love for my team. So we're tough on our team. Like, we are unapologetically, and we know it, and we're clear about it, but we tell them the why.
Yep.
Guys, why we every week on our L10, on our weekly call, whether it be sales or ops, marketing or ops, hey, here are the KPIs, here's where we missed. What are we going to do to change it? And they're like, golly, he's so hard on us. He keeps saying the same thing. Well, it's because if I'm not hard on you, you don't improve. You don't get a better life. You don't make more money. So the standards that you have in life are directly correlated with how much you care about that person or individual. So
that's some heavy dope, dude.
That's a good one, man. And for kids, so this is one of my biggest conflicts with my wife is when she comes home and she's tired, and I shouldn't pick on her, but I think I do the same thing. So I'll pick on myself. And I say, hey, you know what? It's not our normal movie night, but I'm tired and the kids are asking to watch a movie. I'm just going to let them watch a movie. That to me is saying, I don't care enough about my kids to take them outside, throw the ball with them, go play on the swing, read them a story, teach them how to, whatever it might be. I'm just saying I care more about myself and being tired than about putting in the effort. So this is one thing that she and I talk a lot about. I'm like, hey, is this elevating their standards and preparing them to have an exceptional life? Or is this just going to allow them to lead an average life? I believe everybody's created for greatness. And yet there's an average for a reason, right? And I have no desire for anybody in my circle to be average. I want everybody to be exceptional.
Don't get into business if you're in business solely to make money as an owner. Get into business because it's about people. And if you're not
100%.
willing to dedicate the time to pour into your people, go to software sales, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I always
I
tell
want to
people,
thank you for leading the charge. Because
man, thank you for being
effective leaders that do it like you do.
Dude, we are just practicing every day. Put it into practice. One of my great mentors, a guy named Steve Young, we were talking about faith. And I said, hey, how do I become better connected to God or better connected in my marriage? And he just said, put it into practice, dude. Every day, put it into practice, put it into practice, put it into practice. So we're just trying to practice and share anything that we learn along the way. Hopefully, some of the mistakes we've made, hopefully we can shortcut them for other people. But yeah, man. Well, Greg, thanks again. Love you, brother. It was always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. It was today, and look forward to connecting more on the show.
Love you too, brother. Adios.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Exceptional Companies Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or via RSS so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you liked this show, please reach out through our website, www.excoadvisors.com, for free tools to order a copy of Selling Main Street, or to sign up for our free webinar on how to sell your Main Street business.